why multitasking makes you feel more productive, but in the end leaves you feeling much worse. Hello, my name is Dr. Scott Scher, and this particular topic is dear to my heart and many of you. We're going to talk about multitasking here and really what that is and the guilt associated with not getting as much done because we're continuing to switch tasks throughout the day. So let me paint a picture for you. You sit down to work. Maybe it's a Monday morning. Do you have the case of the Mondays? You might, right? It's been a whole weekend off. Now you're back at the office, right? You start writing an email, then your Slack pings. Well, you answer it, right? Then you remember the text you needed to send on Friday that you didn't send. So you go ahead and do that. Then you open up a document that you started on Friday again that you didn't finish. Then you check something quickly online. An hour later, you've touched at least 6 different tasks, maybe more, but none of them are finished. And now the pressure builds. So you try to move faster. You bounce between things even more. And by the end of the day, you're asking yourself, well, why can't I focus anymore? And what did I actually get done? Well, today, I want to start with a simple but important clarification. You are not multitasking. Your brain actually doesn't have the capacity to multitask. What we're really doing is rapid task switching. Your brain jumps from one task to the other. And when we do that, we lose IQ points when we try to go back to the task that we switch from. Resetting your context every time has a significant cost. And the deeper story here is more interesting, interestingly enough, because task switching often, it's not driven by laziness. It's often driven by reward seeking and guilt regulation. So here's the map of today's episode. We're going to go through first, why the brain naturally prefers starting tasks over finishing them. Number 2, how guilt and reward loops create constant task switching. Number 3, why that switching drains energy and fragments your attention. And number 4, we're going to talk about how to get this all back, how to create the capacity for your attention to remain. And I'm going to go really simple with everybody here. We're going to call it the 10-minute rule. And I promise you, it's going to be super simple. And 10 minutes is all you need to get through the task that you're doing. If you can get past that 10-minute mark, you're going to want to continue. And we'll talk more about that. So let's talk about some unspoken drivers here, right? Because there's a hidden reward system underneath this task switching behavior. Starting a task gives your brain a quick reward signal. Opening an email, replying to a message, checking something off. Each one produces a small dopamine pulse. Finishing a task is very, very different. It requires sustained effort, uncertainty, cognitive load. So the brain naturally gravitates to starting many things instead of finishing a few. Now layer in the guilt of not finishing everything, when we feel behind or responsible or worried about letting someone down. The brain starts to seek quick resolution signals as a way to reward itself and try to make you feel like you're actually getting things done, answering a message, starting something new, clearing a notification. But each one temporarily relieves the pressure, that is true, but still the unfinished tasks are accumulating. More guilt, more task switching, and you get into this sort of loop that I call, in some ways, the sympathetic spiral of doom. Now, this sympathetic spiral of doom has lots of different pieces to it, but a big piece of this is the overarching stress that we have to accomplish in a brain, with having a brain that wants constant reward. This is not necessarily our fault, right? Our brains are always looking for new rewards in some ways to keep ourselves surviving and thriving in uncertain environments, at least evolutionarily, but we don't need that anymore. But now we have social media and notifications and things that are popping up in our face that are causing these little dopamine hits, causing a little bit of sympathetic activation, causing a little bit of stress in the system, and then causing us to need more energy every single time we switch tasks. Every time you switch a task, your brain must reload the mental environment. What was I just doing? What was I in the process of? What matters here? This reset takes energy, and that's why your IQ actually drops when you do this. When the brain repeatedly resets, 2 things happen. This is important. First, energy availability drops. Second, attention stability drops. So the system becomes far less effective, more movement, less completion, more guilt, and the loop tightens. Your brain requires a significant amount of energy to maintain its focus, to maintain the capacity to switch tasks is challenging, because every time you do this, you're creating a huge amount more energy required. And again, going back to the task before is very, very difficult because of all the context that is lost. This is what the loop usually looks like. It feels like emotional pressure. Okay, that's the first thing. As you're doing something, you're like, oh, thinking about something else. This is getting difficult. I don't really know what to do. So you reward seek through quick task starting something else. And you constant task switch. So you feel like you're continuing to push forward even though you're not getting very far. This is energy drain and cognitive fragmentation. You have lower completion rates when this happens. And you have more guilt as a result of this and more switching. So the solution really isn't to focus harder. Like, that's just not the key per se, right? The solution is to change the sequence. We want to move from switching, fragmentation, and guilt towards stability, sustained attention, and completion. And that transition often starts with surprisingly small windows of focus. This is something that I know too well. It is very easy for me to have 1,000 things to look at every single moment of every day. Not alone, that alone, of course, having 4 children knock at my door, spending an entire day at soccer tournaments as I did today, thinking about all the things that I have to do, of course, but also trying to stay present at the same time, right? So we're all in this game together on some level. We're all busy. We all have packed schedules. This is the norm now, right? And so how can we do this? How can we create stability? How can we create sustained attention? Okay. The brain stabilizes attention through something called attention momentum. Once the system stays with one cognitive environment long enough, something shifts. Neural networks synchronize. Distractions become less compelling. Effort begins to drop. Many people notice this around 8 to 12 minutes worth of working on a single task. Before that point, and I'm with you here, the brain is often going to still resist. After that point, it's like rolling downhill oftentimes. It often begins to want to continue. It's hard to stop doing what you're doing. This is why short containers of focus can be so powerful. They allow the system to cross the initial resistance threshold to get there. So you can set yourself up for success here. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. The problem is that most productivity advice focuses on removing distractions. But distractions aren't always the real problem. The deeper issue really is unfinished loops and unstable attention state. You can silence notifications and still feel the urge to switch tasks because the nervous system is still trying to resolve that pressure, get that extra dopamine hit. It doesn't want the cognitive load. This is why discipline alone rarely solves a problem. The system needs completion signals. So here's the correct sequence to think about. Okay, a better sequence looks like this. Number 1, shrink the focus window. Instead of trying to focus for hours, again, I used to be able to do this when I was in college. I can't do it now. Instead, start with 10 to 15 minutes. The brain tolerates short containers much more easily. And this is the principle behind the Pomodoro method. In fact, I have a timer here on my desk that I use oftentimes. It has a 10-minute timer. It has a 5. It has 1, etc. Once I get to about 10 minutes, things start changing. If you work in focus blocks, often 20 to 25 minutes, that is the key. But don't forget to have a brief recovery afterwards as well, because cognitive load is real. And people like me and many of you listening are probably going to want to do more, even though once they get through that initial pressure of trying to switch. Then it's like, well, how do you get to stop, right? And that's a different story, but it's important because our brain needs rest, but it needs to build in this muscle of attention and concentration. We have to cross the resistance threshold. That's what it comes down to. The first few minutes are usually the hardest. And that's when I know my brain is all over the place, wanting to do something else. But once we reach that threshold, attention often stabilizes. Many people notice something interesting, and I just mentioned this earlier, that they don't really want to stop once they're in it. The system has transitioned from avoidance to engagement. Let's go, right? And then the third step here is to use completion as regulation. What I mean by that is that completion is one of the most powerful regulators of the nervous system. Finishing something sends a signal. It says, this environment is manageable. That signal reduces internal pressure, which makes sustained attention easier the next time. Also, pat yourself on the back and say, hey, I did it. Because our brain likes external gratification. People tell you that they love you and that you're doing a great job. You're going to love that. Most of us, except for very few people that are not externally gratified. Most people can actually have an internal gratification where they reward themselves by, wow, look what I was able to do. I was able to do that for 20, 25 minutes. Celebrate, do like a fist pump in the air, do like something like, yeah, exciting. I did this, right? And then what you do next is you expand this window of attention gradually, right? Over time, you can extend the container. Stability, engagement, completion, and reward yourself for the completion. That is the key, right? Building better habits is absolutely key. And creating a habit loop requires a reward at the end, requires something that makes you go, I want more of that, right? And that's that dopamine hit, but we can shift it from task switching dopamine hits to task attention and sustaining a task and then rewarding ourselves by the completion of that. So there are a lot of tools you can use to help do this. Okay, I use Pomodoro technique. That's what this is over here. That I use the 10-minute mark almost always is the way to get started. What I'll also do, interestingly here enough, as a side note, is that when I want my mind to just do the task switching and then reward that, I'll let myself do that for 10 or 20 minutes at a time, and then I will stop that too, okay? Because you have to get yourself used to doing more attention work, but you can also reward yourself. You say, you know what, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to let my mind do what it wants for that 10 minutes as I'm doing task, and I do that too. Now, the way you want to think about this too, from a tools perspective, is to think about it not from like major gadgets and things like that. It's just giving yourself the right signals, right? One cognitive task, completion tracking. So track completed task, not just started task, getting your checklist of completed tasks that you did that day. And this works because you can align your brain's natural sequences this way. All right, let's go back to the beginning. So now imagine the same situation again. You sit down to work. It's a Monday morning. You have a case of the Mondays. Maybe you lost your stapler. You know what I'm talking about if you know those references. You sit down to work. Notifications appear. The urge to switch tasking is arising. It's coming. But instead of bouncing between them, you create a 10 to 20 minute container. You stay with one task. By the way, we're better in the mornings typically at getting things done if we do this. 10 to 20 minutes, stay with one task. Maybe even plan what this is going to be before you hit your desk. And this is what I try to do. It's like I know the major things that I need to get done that day and try to get them done early and create these containers for them. After those first few minutes of feeling uncomfortable, something's going to shift. Your attention's going to stabilize. You can finish the task. And that completion changes the emotional landscape. Instead of guilt about task switching and not getting your things done, you experience resolution. You reward yourself. And this will make the next block easier for you to focus on and do. So listen, modern society is just leveraging our evolutionary biology to make us feel guilty all the time of not getting the things done that we want to. And task switching is so much easier than the cognitive load of getting through 3 to 4, maybe 5 or 6 minutes until we can get through that load and know that we want to kind of roll downhill and keep going with that task. Messages, notifications, requests, responsibilities. The nervous system tries to keep up, but the system wasn't designed for all this task switching. It was designed for sequence, completion, and reward yourself for that completion, okay? Because once you understand that, focus stops being about willpower and becomes about creating conditions where attention naturally stabilizes. Often starting with something very simple, 10 minutes, one task, and the willingness to let the brain settle into the work. So try it. Try to just set your alarm on your phone if you need to for 10 minutes and just get through that one task. I promise you, once you get to that 10-minute mark, you're not going to want to stop that task. This happens to me all the time. Task switching is what we're all doing. We're getting dumber as a result of it. Taking the time to create a container where we can make one task get done is going to change your capacity. It's going to decrease your guilt of all the things that you're looking at, like, what did I even do today. You feel like you did a lot, but you did nothing on some level because you didn't get anything done that was deep. Deep work requires attention. Deep work requires a container. Deep work requires getting over that threshold. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, please like and subscribe. And also ask your questions. I'm here to help. And I wish you a great rest of your cognitively awesome, attention-focused day.